Andrew is a media industry veteran with decades of experience, having worked at major networks like Nickelodeon, MTV, and Spike TV before joining Diga Studios as head of production. At Alliance Media Group, he oversees a diverse slate of content including Million Dollar Beach House, John Carpenter's Suburban Screams, and America's Big Deal, managing operations across New York, LA, and various production locations. Beyond production oversight, Andrew is actually responsible for scaling business growth to 30 to 40 million in annual gross revenue while supervising all production related legal, financial, and insurance requirements for a team of 150 plus project based employees. Welcome, Andrew. Look
I,
forward to
I,
having this conversation. Now, Andrew, allow me to ask you, what key challenges are you seeing in the media industry right now, particularly with the shift away from traditional cable models towards streaming platforms, and how is that impacting your approach to content development and production today?
yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the big quandary that's facing the entire industry. The headwinds are really, really strong. I think that for a long time, cable was the dominant business, and both broad kind of general entertainment cable networks, as well as niche and specialty networks, whether it was home and gardens or food or any of those types of networks that we all kind of came up producing content for. And over time, as the emergence of the streamers grew, those audiences flocked over there, and those cable assets became less unique and less important to their companies' portfolios. So what we have seen is, a reduced number of cable buyers out in the marketplace, unless it's in very specific genres, and more of a push to content to be developed and produced with streaming networks, where they have more budgets and they have data with which they can make decisions, and they have a bunch of other factors, that considerations that go into it. So I think that the biggest pivot that I've seen is this idea of how to find the types of content and present them that appeal to these like massive streamers, and less about very hyper focused. We're going to pitch to a garden network, or you're going to pitch to a Nat Geo, or you're going to pitch to very networks that have very specific kind of creative and mandates. And now we're going to like much larger organizations, and how do you kind of cut through and get to the sale? So I think that that's been the biggest change that I've seen is how do we pivot in our business model, and how do we get those ideas out there?
Absolutely. And Andrew, do the traditional modes of outreach work with these types of streamers, these major streamers, or is there a more nuanced approach to dealing with them?
I think that it is still traditional in that you send them materials. They decide if they want to take a pitch meeting or not. There's still a pitch meeting, which could still involve a deck or a sizzle. So from that standpoint, it hasn't changed dramatically. Again, I think the biggest difference is, you're going to a Netflix, or you're going to a Hulu, or you're going to an Amazon Prime, and then you're going within a certain group in there. Sometimes it's the unscripted group, sometimes it's the sports group, and I think outside of that, we used to know going in more because we knew all of the buyers, the specific ones at these networks, at the Lifetimes and whatnot, kind of what their mandates were, what they were looking for, what their goals were, and the types of pitches they took. And I think now a little bit more, a lot of the messaging is they're just looking for like bigger attachments, whether it's on the talent side, big formats, loud ideas. So instead of it being a bunch of say mid-level companies or big companies pitching individual brand specific destinations, now we're all kind of funneling to the same six or seven players. So you would just see logically, it the biggest difference is, again, not always knowing exactly what the mandate is and going in there and pitching.
Interesting. And I think, your point where you said, being louder and bolder, they're actually counting on that next Squid Game hit, right? They're counting on picking up these weird ideas that might just catch on. Now, Andrew, coming a little bit zoning in and zooming in into the business, what are you currently spending your day on? What are you busy on right now?
I would say, listen, in addition to obviously running the physical productions, of which we have a number of them, and overseeing those, a lot of my time is spent on just sort of new business models, right? So that we're not just relying on the typical commissioning model, right? Commissioning model being exactly what you described. You go into an individual network, you pitch an idea, they decide if they want to develop it, if they want to go straight to series with it, and then you go off and you commission it, and you essentially are giving them all the rights. Now, what has had to happen is, as consolidation has taken force and more pressure on these big buyers around budgets, we have to think out of the box on how can we present an idea that not only has strong creative, but also has some kind of interesting business model behind it. So examples I would give you would be coming in with a show where we know we're going to get a significant tax credit. That conversation comes up a lot, whether you're shooting in the States or you're shooting in Canada or you're shooting abroad. Um, are you bringing in a brand sponsor that can underwrite some of the costs? So essentially, you're deficit financing part of the cost of the project. Is there a co-pro model where you can work with another company to, again, help reduce costs, increase efficiencies? So a lot of what we're trying to do is we're trying to still have all our great ideas, but it's how can we come in and position it in such a way, or I would say the last category would be projects that can be self-financed by whatever outside sources there may be, and then in which case the buyers are no longer commissioning the projects, but they'd be licensing the projects. And I think that's a big model that I don't think people really appreciate. When you get past the major shows on a lot of these nets, like you said, the Squid Games and the Love is Blinds and all those other things. When you go through your Netflix or you go through your Hulu and you see all of these other documentaries and these kind of one-off smaller shows, odds are those were probably produced independently to some extent, and then they were licensed over. So that's another important model. Like, it used to be like commissioning was the thing, and now it's sort of like, okay, what are other models, so that we know that there are some pain points around available slots and available budgets, and so how do we make this an easier decision?
Absolutely. Could you walk me through self-financing a little bit? What's that look like today?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you can have private investors. You can go to raise money. A lot of people, again, are going to brands. That's become very, very popular. Is to go to individual brands and get them to finance a portion of it, whether it's through financing or through integrations. And then the idea is, again, the nice thing about that is then the brand and or us as the company, we own the show, right? So we can find multiple windows of where to put the show. Those are some of the most popular ones. Is like either finding some kind of strategic partner or are working with a brand.
Interesting. Could you paint me a picture of maybe an example of where a brand has partnered with yourself or some other company that you know of, and it's been a successful ride
Yeah,
together?
I mean, I know. Not for us, but I know a major alcohol sponsor that wanted to do a particular a bunch of shorts around the launch of their new product. So they partnered with another production company and essentially were able to finance the budget at a reasonable cost up front. And there was a lot of upfront work. So instead of really working with a network like you would or a buyer, the production company works directly with the brand, right? And that can be really appealing to the brand, right? Because there's no other layers of creative approvals. You're working directly with the brand. As many people probably know that listen to this podcast, brands tend to get very involved in the details. Understandably, they need to protect their branding and their messaging. So I've always found that in this business, no matter how I've worked with individual brands, whether it's integration or ad sales or otherwise, They very much know what they want. So the advantage of that model is they are really driving the messaging and the show and the creative. And where our role would come in, or in this case another company, would be on the execution side, and then helping to get it sold, right? And so sometimes also it's a little bit of a push and pull where you kind of want to know where you think you're going to take it ultimately, so that it can help shape some of the creative direction. But I would say the biggest upside to the work with the brands is, you're working directly with them one on one to craft the show, and the final product is something that they've been involved and heavily involved with the whole way through.
Absolutely. Andrew, I'm curious. Do you think this is quite different from how brands operated before, and why has this come to be now?
I think that what happened, my experience. Listen, I was at MTV for many many years. My experience before with the brands were they're for the right opportunity they were open to integrations or product placement, as another term that's used out there. But that gave them obviously some influence and control, but it was always over a very specific part of the content, like sponsoring a performance or sponsoring a graphic or sponsoring some kind of scoring system. This scoring system is brought to you by X, right? And so what my previous experience was, the brands were part of it, but they usually fell into like a very particular segment of the creative and the production plan. I think what's changed now is really starting to embrace, like let's work with the brand entirely on the project, so that we can create ownership, we can retain some rights, there might be opportunity for second, third windows, like I told you. So I think there's really more of an emphasis on building relationships with the brands instead of finding the great product and selling it and then going to the brands. It's like, let's find the brands and let's find what they want to do and what's important to them, and then we'll craft great creative. So that's what I would think the biggest shift has probably been.
Interesting. And I'm coming up with a very funny example of this brand that produced a film that's not meant to be released until like 100 years later. Do you recall?
No,
And maybe they didn't even make that film, but it got a big buzz out of it, like
yes.
just that collaboration that a film that they made, and that will only be released 100 years later when everyone's dead, is a bit funny, but it got a big buzz, and that's the advertising right there.
Yeah, I listen. That's the biggest win for them, right? But however they're involved in the process, if they can get something to go viral and get out there in the universe, I mean, that does so much marketing work for them that they couldn't. They'd have to spend significant sums of money otherwise to get those sort of impressions. So yeah, I mean, I love the idea of what you just described, because it seems like something that could catch fire if it gets picked up in the right place on the right platform.
Absolutely. Andrew, what is some of the next short-term goals for Diga Studios and going forward, 6 to 12 months? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, Diga continues to really lean into um, like what we do everything. I mean, we do unscripted, we do events, we do scripted shows, we do reality, we do doc, we do digital. Like, so there's not anything we don't do. I think the biggest goal for Diga is to continue to over deliver in the areas that are most appealing in the marketplace, right? Whether that's really like niche shows, like home and garden kind of house type shows, whether that's sports or sports adjacent, whether that's premium documentary or true crime. So I think what we're our goal is just continue to like really keep ourselves connected to the marketplace and where mandates or where preferences are going, like we do, and we do that through regular conversations with all our partners, and then making sure where I really come into that, because I'm not a on the development side, I'm on the production side, is making sure that we have really strong models behind it. So if and when we get the engagement we know we can say, hey, we can do this project and we can figure out how to do it for X, and if they need to do it for Y, there's another model that supports that, right? So my other parts of my company are out there really trying to project 6, 9 months, a year down the road, where um, where there might be white space for the right ideas, and then my job is to make sure we can be nimble and efficient and execute when the time comes.
Brilliant. Now, what then becomes, Andrew, some of the most important aspects of your business right now in terms of priority number one? What's screaming at you?
Um, I think priority number one continues to be um, well, it's always going to be finding the right ideas, right? It's always going to be kind of landing that, especially with the streamers, because you really need to come in with either like a broad idea or format, or you have to get some of the right level of talent attached to it, which is always tricky. I would say that the number one model, number one thing that should be of importance to any production company, right, is how to continue to produce efficiently and be nimble and just and really think out of the box. You know, I think some of the biggest challenges is a lot of people um, a lot of people prospered. A lot of production companies prospered in the cable industry where we had 100 different channels and had multiple opportunities to sell an idea. So where an idea might have been appealing to say seven or eight places 3, 4, 5 years ago, it might be appealing to half of that, right? So you have to have the total package. You have to have the idea. You got to have the company behind it that people trust, like ours, that you can execute with, and you need to have the right kind of business plan, production plan, and model to make the show.
Absolutely. Andrew, I hear Nimble increasingly more than ever. Why is it so important to be nimble today than ever before?
Yeah, I think that is because the decision making process has expanded on the buying side. I think that whereas it used to be you went to an individual creative executive and there was a little bit more of greenlighting, sort of following gut level greenlighting, they used to call it. Like, this feels like it could be a cool idea. This feels like it might break through. Let's go for it, right? I think in previous years, maybe a lot of these creative executives had more control over their ability to buy. And now I think every one of these, since a lot of these companies obviously roll up to tech companies or otherwise, they sort of follow this sort of group model where I think data, I think finance, all have a significant seat at the table when it comes to picking up shows and picking up projects. So, now that you've added a bunch of different decision makers at the table, I think when people talk about nimble, it means you think you're going down one path, and that door closes, but there's another door opens, and so how do we keep moving quickly? It's like it's a little bit of whack a mole. Sometimes it feels like that carnival game, where something pops up,
Yeah,
pops up again. So it needs to you need to respond well. You need to be transparent. You need to show you have good ideas and enthusiasm, and projects will go. They just don't move. They don't get into a green light position as fast as they used to.
absolutely. Andrew, with regards to some of those doors opening and closing and green lighting, what's something you've tried before that hasn't maybe worked?
Um, okay, sometimes in the past we used to, as a company, would make an investment, small investment on the development side. For example, like we decided we had a great ensemble show, and we thought we wanted to be able to walk in and present a cast. We might spend a few dollars on putting together a reel, right? Or doing some informal casting, or even doing a day of shoot, right? And so, previously, we have tried that before for the right ideas that we felt like needed that extra element to get there. But I would say increasingly, we have found that there's some you need a deck, you need a strong idea, but to invest a lot more money than that up front without really any sort of line of sight, like if the show's going to go and when it might go. I think increasingly we sort of moved away from that. Like, well, when we refer to it in the term as like paid development or internal development, right? If we'll do development if a buyer's willing to say, yeah, I kind of like that idea. I'll give you X amount of money to go out and cast it for a week and see what we can find, or give us a sizzle and here's X amount of dollars. I think we are that's the approach we lean into more than sort of saying, what, we really believe in this, so let's self finance ourselves and hope can recoup it if we sell.
All right, could you walk me through that a little bit? What's that conversation like, where you're speaking to these brands and people?
You mean as far as development materials?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times what we're doing is we're having long lead conversations because of our relationships and my boss's relationship to really understand what they are looking for, right? And then we are either we have stuff in the pipeline that we've been talking about internally that we think might work towards their mandate, or we go and we seek out something that they want. But I think right now we're really trying to make the buying executive part of the process, right? Because they're going to know best what their individual company is looking for, and they also will be very good at advising us. To your point, okay, I think a deck would suffice. Oh no, I think a tape would be good too, or I think X, Y, and Z might be beneficial. So again, as opposed to trying to get all the pieces lined up and then walking in the room, we're starting those conversations earlier so that we kind of have a better sense of what they need, and then we're
Mm,
collaborating together about, okay, what are the materials we need to get there and how do we minimize any spend around it.
absolutely. And sometimes it's just a matter of saying, what do you need from me, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah, and honestly, part of the decision also is like, where are you pitching, who are you pitching, are you dealing with a manager level, are you dealing with a VP level? Like I think that sometimes you really need to understand who on the other side, because you know I've always found that a lot of these development executives, like a big part of their job is taking pitches, right? So a lot of times, sometimes you walk into a pitch and you may feel like it went great, and the idea goes nowhere. And sometimes maybe you feel like it went okay, and then they show a lot of interest. I think the more we can eliminate that, because there's so much consolidation going on that on the network side and on the buyer side, and there's consolidations of departments, there's people leaving, there's layoffs. So it's very, very, very hard to sometimes know who you're talking to and what their sphere of influence might be to get a project sold. So the more you can kind of come in stacking the deck, meaning you've spoken to them and you kind of know what their where their heads at, or you can get any kind of intel, whether it's directly or through an agent, your agent. Our agents are very helpful advising us on that because they're very tapped into the day to day. Then I think the better the pitch is, and the better there is the chance that the show goes forward.
absolutely, there's no, you can never be over prepared. But in saying that, I feel like it's important to go to the right people to begin with,
Yes.
and really speak to their number one problem, their number one desire, and so that really you can get things moving and not have to go climb that ladder, just finding the right person to speak to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Andrew, what is now the biggest hurdle with regards to getting those projects greenlit, even with the new type of business model that you're speaking about?
I would just say the amount of time it takes to get the decision. Sometimes, I think that where that just impacts is sometimes you have shows that where something's happening in real time, or you're trying to get ahead of a story. I think sometimes there's a seasonal or other type of opportunity, like a grant you might be applying for, so you need to shoot by X date. I think that just getting through that timeline can be is significantly impact where it used to be, and that kind of leaves the seller like us sometimes in a bit of limbo. Like, should we take the show elsewhere? Should we not take the show elsewhere? X, Y, and Z buyer seems engaged. So it's just more. It takes more time to get to a decision, and it's a little bit more unpredictable the process.
Gotcha. Now, if you had a magic wand, you could give it a big Disney wish. What would that one thing be, Andrew, coming down to the end? What would that one thing be that you'd try to solve internally within the business where you could get things moving a lot quicker and get those right decision makers on the call?
Um, Again, I mean, listen, I'm not in the inner hallways of a lot of these buyers, but my guess is I would love to get to a place where they're able to, program from the gut a little bit more, where they're able to give. Right now, it is sort of a risk averse approach. It feels like to me, right? They lean into existing IP, they lean into spin offs, they lean into things that went there, and like all the great things on TV since the beginning of times were original ideas, right? And so I think that there's a bit of a risk aversion to original ideas. If you're going to tell somebody they can spin off this housewives show or they can do an original show, the metrics are going to tell them that the spin off is still the better way to go. And I guess if I could wave my magic wand, it would go back to a time where the creative executives had maybe a little more control over some of their decision making, and then thereby allowed them to maybe take, a few, when I say chances, I mean, mitigated, but nothing crazy, but maybe an opportunity to take a few shots. I think all the great stuff. I mean, I worked at networks at a time when we were taking shots all the time, and we were breaking
Mm,
genres, and we were reinventing formats, and we
mm.
were moving quickly, and we were constantly churning, and I felt like we put out a lot of good ideas, and I just because the audience has gravitated towards streaming and platforms like TikTok and Instagram doesn't mean that there's still not an opportunity for some like compelling content. It just means, it may not always be able to be derived from an existing property or IP.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your sharing your insights and the deep industrial knowledge. I'm sure everyone listening to this would feel so much more complete after hearing all of this. Thank you so much, Andrew.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.
You too.